Today we'll be looking at the real-life tribe and how they act, and this all comes from an interesting book. This isn't only thanks to me, I have to say thank you to Stone Age Herbalist because he made a Twitter thread about the book Don't Sleep, There Are Snakes, made by Daniel Everett. A book written by Daniel Everett named Don't Sleep, There Are Snakes. Follow Stone Age Herbalist by the way. And let's begin with the Pirahas. An interesting Amazonian tribe. As the thread unfolds, I think you're going to see why I want to put them in Warhammer. So let's begin with the first thing. Everett is confused why the Pirahas are insisting an angry spirit is shouting at them from the beach. Clearly there's no one there. And here we begin. I turned to Kohoy, my principal language teacher, and asked, "What's up?" He was standing to my right, his strong, brown, lean body tense from what he was looking at. "Don't you see him over there?" he asked impatiently. Xigagai, one of the beings that lives above the clouds, is standing on the beach, yelling at us, telling us he will kill us if we go to the jungle. "Where?" I asked. "I don't see him." "Right there," Kohoy snapped, looking intently towards the middle of the apparently empty beach. "In the jungle behind the beach?" "No, there, on the beach, look," he replied with exasperation. In the jungle with the Pirahas, I regularly failed to see wildlife they saw. My inexperienced eyes just weren't able to see as theirs did. But this was different. Even I could tell that there was nothing on that white sandy beach, no more than 100 yards away. And yet, as certain as I was about this, the Pirahas were equally certain that there was something there. Maybe there had been something there that I just missed seeing, but they insisted that what they were seeing, Xiagagai, was still there. Next, Everett learns that they don't sleep for more than a few short bursts at a time. The Pirahas say different things when they leave my hut at night on their way to bed. Sometimes they just say, "I'm going." But frequently they use an expression that, though surprising at first, has come to be one of my favorite ways of saying goodnight. "Don't sleep, there are snakes." The Pirahas say this for two reasons. First, they believe that by sleeping less, they can harden themselves, a value they all share. Second, they know that danger is all around them in the jungle, and that sleeping soundly can leave one defenseless from attack by any of the numerous predators around the village. The Pirahas laugh and talk a good part of the night. They don't sleep much at one time. Rarely have I ever heard the village completely quiet at night or noticed someone sleeping for several hours straight. I have learned so much from the Pirahas over the years, but this is perhaps my favorite lesson. Sure, life is hard and there is plenty of danger, and it might make us lose some sleep from time to time, but enjoying it, life goes on. Next we'll go on some linguistics, and now if I butcher some of these words, what are the Pirahas gonna do? Sue me. Here we learned that some verbs have 65,000 forms. "Kahayoi," he answered as I pointed at the shaft of the arrow at the side of his hut. The field linguistics classes I had taken with the SIL before coming to Brazil were very good, and I had found a talent for linguistics that I did not realize I had. Within an hour of working with Xoisoy and others as interested pariahs surrounded us, I had confirmed earlier findings by Sheldon and his predecessor, Arlon Heinrichs, that there were only 11 or so phones in Piraha, that the basic organization of their sentence was SOV, subject, object, verb, the most common ordering among the world's languages, and that their verbs were very complicated. Now I know that each Piraha verb form has at least 65,000 possible forms. I grew less worried about the situation. I could do this. Next, Everett gets his own name in Pirahas, because the Pirahas don't like foreign things, and that includes words. I knew that the Pirahas would name me, because Dawn had told me that they name all foreigners, since they don't like to say foreign names. I later learned that the names are based on a similarity that the Pirahas perceive between the foreigners and some Piraha. Among the men there that day was a young man named Jai, and I had to admit that I could see some resemblance. Jai would be my name for the next 10 years, until the very same Kabugi, now called Ksafopati, told me that my name was now too old, and that my new name was Ksaibigai. About 6 years after that, my name was changed again to what it is today, Paoxiaxi, the name of a very old man. As I learned, the Pirahas change names from time to time, usually when individual Pirahas trade names with spirits they encounter in the jungle. This next part deals in what the Pirahas call themselves and what they call foreigners. As we walked along, I remember the words that had been given to me by the Pirahas in their language for Piraha people: Hiahili, Piraha language, Saapastili, foreigner, Xaoi, and foreign language, Xapaigasi. Piraha language was clearly a combination of Xapai, head, and Ti, straight, plus the suffix si, which indicates that the word it is attached to is a name or a proper noun, straight head. Piraha people was he, as he, I, is, and Ti, straight, plus he, another marker similar to si. He is straight head, or straight. Foreigner means fork, as in fork in the tree branch, and foreign languages meant crooked head. Now we go to the part where we learn that it's kind of hard to describe colors, or talk about the past to the Pirahas. Finally, the Piraha language is notoriously difficult because it lacks things that many other languages have, especially in the way that it puts sentences together. For example, the language has no comparatives, so I couldn't find expressions like this is big, that is bigger. I couldn't find color words, no simple words for red, green, blue, and so on. Only descriptive phrases like that is like blood for red, or that is not ripe yet for green. And I couldn't find stories about the past. When you can't find something, but you expect it to be there, you can waste months looking for something that doesn't exist. Everett wishes he was amongst more interesting people. He doesn't really get where's the culture in them. I indulged in self-pity, thinking that I could have been working with interesting people. On many days, the men didn't do anything I could see but sit around the graying embers of a fire, talking, laughing, farting, and pulling baked sweet potatoes out of the coals. Occasionally, they supplemented this routine by pulling one another's genitals and laughing as though they were the first earthlings to engage in something so clever. Excuse me, this part always makes me laugh. I had hoped to see villages like those that I had studied in anthropology classes, such as the Yanomami villages, with their open huts built around a village clearing, and the Ge villages, arranged like a wagon wheel, with houses at the ends of the spooks. It seemed to me that the Piraha villages had no organization. They were overgrown with grass, which attracted bugs and snakes. Why couldn't they at least clear the brushes and garbage out of their villages? I have seen Piraha sleep while covered with hundreds of migrating cockroaches, and I have heard them snore contentedly with tarantulas crawling over them. The Pirahas don't make baskets that last, only things that, can easily be replaced and thrown away after one use. They could make longer lasting baskets simply by selecting more durable material, such as wicker, but they don't. I concluded because they don't want them. This is interesting. It indicates an interest in making things as you go. Other material artifacts include necklaces. The Pirahas make them to ward off spirits and to look more attractive. Women, girls, and babies of both genders wear necklaces. Women make these necklaces from seeds and homespun cotton strings, decorating them further with teeth, feathers, beads, beer can pull tabs, and other objects. The necklaces rarely show symmetry and are very crude and unattractive compared to the artifacts of other groups in the region, such as the Tenharim and the Parintian, known for beautiful feather headdresses, jaguar tooth necklaces, fine woven baskets and strainers, and tools for manoic processing. And for the Pirahas, necklaces are decorative only secondarily, their primary purpose being to ward off the evil spirits that Pirahas see almost daily. The Pirahas, of course, have a problem with canoes as well, not only baskets. Let's begin. The Pirahas can make canoes out of bark called cagahoy, but they rarely do, preferring to steal or trade for the sturdier dugout and board canoes made by Brazilians, called xagosas. And as much as the Pirahas depend on these sturdier canoes for their fishing, transportation, and recreation on the river, it has always fascinated me that they do not make them, and they never have enough to go around for all the families in the village. Although canoes are said to be possessed by individuals of the village and hence are not, properly speaking, community property, in practice each canoe owner loans out his canoe either to a son or son-in-law or to someone else in the village. Using someone's canoe carries the expectation that any fish caught while using that canoe will be shared with the canoe's owner. Acquiring new canoes for the village is always difficult for the Pirahas, and so it doesn't surprise me when one day they turn to me for help. "Dan, can you buy us a canoe? Our canoes are rotten," the men said to me one day out of the blue as they sat in my house drinking coffee. "Why don't you make a canoe?" I asked. "Pirahas don't make canoes. We don't know how." "But I know you can make a bark canoe. I have seen you do that," I rejoined. "Bark canoes don't carry weight. One man, some fish, no more. Only Brazilian canoes are good. Piraha canoes are no good." "Who makes canoes around here?" I asked them. "At Palco and Mondo, they make canoes," the men answered, nearly in unison. It appeared that they didn't make dugout canoes because they didn't know how, so I decided to help them learn. And so they got them a master. After about 5 days of intense effort, they made a beautiful dugout canoe and showed it off proudly to me. I bought the tools for them to make more. Then a few days after Simpiricio left, the guy that taught them how to make the canoes, the Pirahas asked me for another canoe. I told them that they could make their own now. They said Pirahas don't make canoes, and walked away. No Piraha has ever made another xagoa, to my knowledge. This taught me that Pirahas don't import foreign knowledge or adopt foreign work habits easily, if at all, no matter how useful one might think that the knowledge is to them. But it doesn't just stop with canoes and baskets, it goes to food. And that's kind of interesting. Pirahas have the knowledge to preserve meat when they are about to embark for a place where they expect to encounter Brazilians. They salt meat, if they have salt, or smoke it to preserve it. But among themselves, they never preserve meat. I haven't seen another Amazonian group that doesn't salt or smoke meat routinely. The Pirahas consume everything as soon as it's hunted or gathered. They preserve nothing for themselves. Leftovers are eaten until they are gone, even if the meat begins to turn rancid. Baskets and food are short-term projects for them. In fact, why bother even eating regularly? Food will come. Today, we'll stay home. Americans eat too much. The Pirahas have talked to me about why they don't hunt or fish some days when they are hungry. Instead, they might play tag or play with my wheelbarrow or lie around and talk. "Why aren't you fishing?" I asked. "Today we will just stay home," someone answered. "Aren't you hungry?" "Pirahas aren't eating every day." "Then Pirahas are hard." Americans eat a lot. Pirahas eat little. Pirahas consider hunger a useful way to toughen themselves. Missing a meal or two, or even going without eating for a day, is taken in stride. I have seen people dance for 3 days with only brief breaks, not hunting, fishing, or gathering, and without any stockpiled food. Now this next part is kind of disgusting for me, and you'll see why. But as relaxed as they are with everything else, so are they about sex and marriage. Oh boy. Sex and marriage also involve no ritual that I can see. Although Pirahas are reluctant to discuss their own intimate sexual details, they have done so in general terms on occasion. They refer to cunnilingus and fellatio as licking like dogs, though this comparison to animal behavior is not intended to denigrate the act at all. They consider animals good examples of how to live. Sexual intercourse is described as eating the other. I ate him or I ate her means I had sexual intercourse with him or her. The Pirahas quite enjoy sex and allude to it or talk about other sexual activities freely. To them, children are just little adults. That evening, as we watched bits of the video, we noticed that a toddler about 2 years old was sitting in the hut behind the man we were interviewing. The child was playing with a sharp kitchen knife about 9 inches in length. He was swinging the knife blade around him, often coming close to his eyes, his chest, his arm, and other body parts one would not like to slice off or perforate. What really got our attention though was that when he dropped the knife, his mother, talking to someone else, reached backward nonchalantly without interrupting her conversation, picked up the knife and handed it back to the toddler. No one told him not to cut himself or hurt himself with the knife, and he didn't. But I have seen other Piraha children cut themselves severely with knives. Many times Karen or I had to put sulf powder on cuts to reduce the chances of infection. Oh boy. And the mother will often answer a baby's cry of pain in such circumstances with a growl of disgust, a low guttural She might pick it up by an arm and angrily, but not violently, set it down abruptly away from the danger. But parents do not hug the child or say things like, "Poor baby, I'm so sorry, let mommy kiss it and make the boo-boo better." The Pirahas stare with surprise when they see non-Piraha mothers do this. They even think it's funny. Don't they want their children to learn to take care of themselves? The Piraha asked me. But there is more to it than wanting children to become autonomous adults. The Pirahas have an undercurrent of Darwinism running through their parenting philosophy. Their style of parenting has the result of producing very tough and resilient adults who do not believe that anyone owes them anything. Steve Sheldon told me about a woman giving birth alone on a beach. Something went wrong, a breech birth. The woman was in agony. "Help me, please. The baby will not come," she cried. The Pirahas sat passively, some looking tense, some talking normally. "I'm dying, this hurts. The baby will not come out," she screamed. No one answered. It was late afternoon. Steve started towards her. "No, she doesn't want you. She wants her parents," he was told. The implication clearly being that he was not to go to her. But her parents were not around, and no one else was going to her aid. The evening came and her cries came regularly, but ever more weakly. Finally, they stopped. In the morning, Steve learned that she and the baby had died on the beach unassisted. Steve recorded a story about this incident, repeated here. This text is valuable for 2 reasons. First, it recounts a tragic incident that provides insight into Piraha culture. In particular, it tells us that the Pirahas let a young woman die alone without help because of their belief that people must be strong and get through difficulties on their own. Okay, enough with the sadness, let's go to something more funny, okay? Let's go to, how about toddlers smoking fat cigarettes? Oh no, not... One afternoon I saw Patia coming down the path. He was about 3 years old. Paita, I think is his name, Paita was always filthy, reminding me of Pigpen from the Peanuts comic strip. He tilted his head when he looked at you, and grinned and laughed freely. His feet and legs were covered in mud since the path was so wet. But what attracted my attention was that this little 3-year-old was smoking a fat cigarette hand-rolled. His father no doubt had rolled it for him, strong hard tobacco rolled in notebook paper, and Paita was wearing a dress. As the father came along the path, not far behind Paita, I asked laughingly, "What is your son doing?" I was referring to the cigarette. Koksoy responded, "Oh, I like to dress him in girls' clothes." For Koksoy, the unusual aspect of his son's appearance had nothing to do with smoking. Even if the Pirahas had known about the long-term health effects of tobacco use, it would not have affected whether they gave it to their children. First, no Piraha smokes enough for it to present any significant health risk. They only have access to tobacco every couple of months and can never get more than about a day's supply. Second, if an adult can take the risk of smoking, a child can too. Of course, the dress was evidence that children are treated somewhat differently from adults, but these differences do not include prohibitions against engaging in activities more commonly associated with adults in Western society, and we won't be done with their children just yet. But the Pirahas were certain that the baby would die for 3 reasons. First, it was near death already. They believed that when a person gets emaciated to a certain point, a point this baby had passed, the person would not survive. Second, they also believed that for a baby this sick to survive, it needed to be cared for by a Piraha mother, one that would nurse it. And this was not going to happen, because the baby's mother had died, and no other mother would allow her own baby to go hungry in order to feed another woman's baby. Finally, they did not believe that our medicine could compensate for these first 2 conditions. So my efforts to feed the baby were, to the Pirahas, just prolonging its misery and causing it unnecessary pain. Oh boy, I know where this is going and it hurt. When we returned from our jog, several Pirahas were huddled in the corner of our house, and there was a strong smell of alcohol in the air. Those in the huddle looked conspiratorial and stared at us. Some seemed angry, others ashamed. Others just stared down at something on the ground that they were all surrounding. As I approached, they parted. Poco's baby was on the ground, dead. They had forced Kashaka down his throat and killed it. What happened to the baby? I asked, almost in tears. It died. It was in pain. It wanted to die, they replied. I just picked up the baby and held it, with tears now beginning to stream down my cheeks. Why would they kill a baby? I asked myself in confusion and grief. If you think that's bad, the next part is even more disgusting. Sexually, it is the same. So long as children are not forced or hurt, there is no prohibition against their participating in sex with adults. I remember once talking to Xiao Xoi, a Piraha man in his late 30s, when a 9 or 10-year-old girl was standing beside him. As we talked, she rubbed her hands sensually over his chest and back and rubbed his crotch area through his thin, worn nylon shorts. Both were enjoying themselves. What's she doing? I asked superfluously. Oh, she's just playing. We play together. When she's big, she will be my wife, was his nonchalant reply. And indeed, after the girl went through puberty, they were married. Marriage itself among the Pirahas, like marriage in all cultures, comes with sets of mores that are enforced in different ways. Let's go to teaching them about colors, that's better. In 1980, at the Piraha's urging, Karen and I began a series of evening classes in counting and literacy. My entire family participated, with Shannon, Christine, and Caleb, 9, 6, and 3 at the time, sitting with Piraha men and women and working with them. Each evening for 8 months, we tried to teach Piraha men and women to count to 10 in Portuguese. They wanted to learn this because they knew that they did not understand money and wanted to be able to tell whether they were being cheated, or so they told us, by the river traders. After 8 months of daily efforts without ever needing to call the Pirahas to come for class, all meetings were started by them with such enthusiasm, the people concluded that they could not learn this material and classes were abandoned. Not one Piraha learned to count to 10 in 8 months. None learned to add 3 plus 1 or even 1 plus 1, if regularly written or saying the numeral 2 in answer to the letter is evidence of learning. Whatever else might be responsible for the Piraha's lack of acquiring the skills of counting, I believe that one crucial factor is that they ultimately do not value Portuguese or American knowledge. In fact, they actively oppose some aspects of it coming into their lives. They ask questions about outside cultures largely for the entertainment value of the answers. If one tries to suggest, as we originally did, in a math class, that there is actually a preferred response to a specific question, this is unwelcome and will likely result in a change of conversational topic or simple irritation. As a further example of this, I consider the fact that Pirahas would write stories on paper, which I gave them for this purpose at their request. These inscriptions consisted of a series of identical repetitive, usually circular marks, but the authors would read the stories back to me, telling me something about their day, about someone's sickness, and so on, all of which they claim to be reading from their marks. They might even make marks on paper and say Portuguese numbers, while holding the paper for me to see. They did not care at all that their symbols were all the same, nor that there are such things as correct and incorrect written forms. When I asked them to draw a symbol twice, it was never replicated. They considered their writing to be no different from the marks that I made. In classes, we were never able to train a Piraha to draw a straight line without serious coaching, and they were never able to repeat that feat in subsequent trials without more coaching. Partially, this was because they see the entire process as fun and enjoy the interaction, but it was also because the concept of a correct way to draw is profoundly foreign to them. You know what, let's go back to the culture. I think that's more interesting, right? But the Pirahas lack folk tales, so everyday stories and the conversation play a vital binding role. They lack any form of fiction, and their myths lack a property common to the myths of most societies. Namely, they do not involve events for which there is no living eyewitness. The latter is at once a small and a profound difference. It is a small difference in the sense that the Pirahas do not have stories that bind their culture together like all other human societies. But it is a profound difference because of the evidentiary twist imposed by the Pirahas on their myths. There must be an eyewitness alive at the time of the telling. I sat with Kohoy once and he asked me, after hearing about my god, "What else does your god do?" And I answered, "Well, he made the stars and he made the earth." Then I asked, "What do the Pirahas say?" He answered, "Well, the Pirahas say that these things were not made." The Pirahas, I learned, have no concept of a supreme or creator god. They have individual spirits, but they believe that they have seen these spirits, and they believe they see them regularly. When we looked into it, we saw that these aren't invisible spirits that they're seeing. They are entities that take on the shape of things in the environment. They'll all call a jaguar a spirit, or a tree a spirit, depending on the kind of properties that it has. Spirit doesn't really mean for them what it means for us, and everything they say they have to evaluate empirically. But if all Piraha myths must exemplify immediacy of experience, then the scriptures of many world religions such as the Bible, the Quran, the Vedas, and so on could not be translated or discussed among the Pirahas, because they involve stories from which there is no living eyewitness. This is the main reason that no missionary for nearly 300 years has had any impact on the Piraha's religion. The stories of the Abrahamic religions lack living eyewitnesses, at least as I practiced religion when I was religious. I believe that immediacy of experience might explain the disparate gaps and unusual facts about Piraha that had been accumulating in my thoughts and notebooks over the months. It would explain the lack of numerals and counting in Pirahas, because these are skills that are mainly applied in generalizations beyond immediate experience. Numbers and counting are by definition abstractions, because they entail classifying objects in general terms. Since abstractions that extend beyond experience could violate the cultural immediacy of experience principle, however, these would be prohibited in the language. But although these hypotheses seemed promising, it still needed to be refined. In the meantime, I remembered other facts that seemed to support the value of immediate experience. For example, I recalled that the Pirahas don't store food, they don't plan more than one day at a time, they don't talk about the distant future or distant past. They seem to focus on now, on their immediate experience. I'm just gonna add that they lack object permanence, so if they don't see a thing, it's not there. Like toddlers. Back to the real thing in the book from Stone Age Herbalist. In fact, even believing continuous identity is suspect to them. You are not the same person stepping into a river. A new name equals a new identity. A culture concerned entirely with the present. Let's begin from the book now. Pirahas occasionally talked about me when I emerged from the river in the evenings after my bath. I heard them ask one another, "Is this the same one who entered the river, or is it Kapioxiai?" When I heard them discuss what was the same and what was different about me after I emerged from the river, I was reminded of Heraclitus, who was concerned about the nature of identities through time. Heraclitus posed the question of whether one could step twice in the same river. The water that we stepped into the first time is no longer there. The banks have been altered by the flow so that they are not exactly the same. So apparently, we step into a different river. But that's not a satisfying conclusion. Surely it is the same river. So what does it mean to say that something or someone is the same this instant as they were a minute ago? What does it mean to say that I am the same person I was when I was a toddler? None of my selves are the same. Few, if any, of my thoughts are. To the Pirahas, people are not the same in each phase of their lives. When you get a new name from a spirit, something anyone can do anytime they see a spirit, you are not exactly the same person as you were before. Once when I arrived in Posto Novo, I went up to... I'm not gonna pronounce that. Or you know what, I'm gonna try. What are they gonna do? Sue me? Kohobihiai. And I asked him to work with me, as he always did. No answer. So I asked again. Screw that. Hey Kohoi, do you want to mark paper with me? Still no answer. So I asked him why he wasn't talking to me. He responded, were you talking to me? My name is Tiapahai. There is no Kohoi here. Once I was called Kohoi, but he's gone now, and Tiapahai is here. There are words, opinions, and ideas that I might want to say right now, but I know that if I say them, YouTube will punish me, and it will be a severe punishment this time around. So I think I'll shut my mouth. Enjoy this thing. I really hope you enjoyed this look into a different culture than what you normally see. And I'll see you in the next one.